The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Report.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast, connecting Virginians to their government. We're pleased to have Delegate Nick Freitas with us this morning. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, Woody.
Senator Bryce Reeves, good to see you, sir.
The legislation, we're down to about 15 in the House so far, going through that process today, in fact, and we're just got a lot of good pieces of legislation, and not only
what we'd like to see at this point. As far as the subcommittee I just came from, it's actually our second piece of teacher licensure reform. So one of the things that we all recognize is critical to ensuring that you have an educated workforce is an educational system which works for all kids. And so we've had two bills that allow the local superintendent and school board in order to waive some of the licensure requirements for our career technical educators as well as our teachers in general. Because right now we have over 800 shortages across the Commonwealth with respect to teachers. 800? 800 in the Commonwealth. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we've created a lot of regulation at the state level, and all of it has good intention. But the problem is it creates barriers to entry into the marketplace, and the people that end up hurting from that as a result are our students when we have overcrowded classrooms. And Senator Reeves actually worked with me on both this legislation, helped me make sure it would get through the Senate, and I think both pieces of legislation are going to head to the governor's desk. So that's very exciting for our localities. It's very exciting for our teachers and our students.
And Senator, you chair a very important committee. Talk to us about its work.
So I chair the Social Service and Rehabilitation Committee, and we actually, the title of the committee is a little bit probably off, but we deal with alcohol, beverage control, those ratios, anything having to do with spirits and beer and wine, our craft breweries, all those sort of things, plus all what I call the 7 silos of social services, from TANF, often called the least, the last, and the lost among us, but we've got to stop that handout mentality and give them the hand up. And how do we do that? As Nick talked about a little bit about workforce development and trying to make sure that all these pieces come together. You know, when you start putting bills in to affect a certain piece of legislation, how does it affect something over here? And so part of my task as chairman of that committee is to make sure that, one, what we're doing is the right thing constitutionally. Two, what are we trying to solve? Who does it affect? And what's the impact also on the budget? Because the big thing coming into the session was a $1.26 billion shortfall, right? And one of the things that we have been trying to do is we know where our localities are. Everyone's hurting for money, but what we have to do is to make sure that we are good stewards of those tax dollars that you give us as a state to make sure. So a couple things we're trying not to do. Put unfunded mandates back down to localities, because anything we get from the federal government oftentimes is burdensome with those regulations. And anytime you put on a new piece of legislation, there's some regulatory burden there. And so we have to account for those as well. So really we've been playing a lot of defense, I think, in my committee this year, where people are putting in well-intended pieces of legislation, but the real reality is, one, we have a budget deficit. As much as I want to help on some of these, and they might do some good, we have to kind of make those hard decisions, and so we've been making those decisions this year.
Great. And Doug Freitas, you're both veterans. About a year ago, you made an impassioned plea on the floor of the House to assist a sergeant. Talk to us about why you did that, and did that ever get resolved?
Sure. Sergeant First Class Charles Martland and myself actually served in 1st Special Forces Group, and Sergeant First Class Martland and his captain, Captain Quinn, were over in Afghanistan, and they had 2 different instances take place. One was where an Iraqi police officer that they had been training actually raped a young girl, and they followed the typical procedure. They went up through the American chain of command, it came back down through the Afghanistan chain of command, and the end result was that officer got 24 hours in jail, and then when he got out, the girl was forced to marry him. So they had a second incident take place, and this was an incident where a young boy had been kidnapped by an Iraqi police officer, or excuse me, an Afghanistan police officer. He had been held for over a week, and he had been repeatedly raped and abused. So when the mother confronted the police officer, she was beaten, And so the mother and this child turned to the Special Forces A-team that was in that area of Afghanistan. They came in, they talked to Captain Quinn, they talked to Sergeant First Class Martland. They both confronted the the Afghanistan police officer. He admitted to it and then laughed it off, said it wasn't a big deal. And so they proceeded to, we'll say, roughly remove him from the base. And as a result, Captain Quinn and Sergeant First Class Martland were both relieved of their command, and they were sent back to the United States. Captain Quinn decided to leave the military shortly after that. Sergeant First Class Martland decided to stay. And when we were downsizing, they had said that because of this negative aspect to his record, that they weren't going to allow him to re-enlist. And Senator Reeves and I, we thought that was ridiculous. This idea that it is so important over there. I think a lot of people who haven't served in that capacity don't understand that when you're talking about a counterinsurgency environment, it is all about building trust with the local community. And when the local community starts to identify their law enforcement and the American military as contributing to the problem instead of helping it, our guys had to take action. And they did. They did to the benefit of this woman, they did to the benefit of this young boy, and they were punished for it. And I think the overwhelming majority of Americans want people like Captain Quinn and Sergeant First Class Martland wearing the cloth of the country. And so I had the opportunity to speak about it on the floor, and what was amazing was we ended up getting 98 out of 100 delegates to sign on to a committing resolution. Senator Reeves actually got all 40 senators to sign on to it. He championed it over on the Senate side. But I think what was really moving for both of us as we looked at how this played out was that we got tens of thousands of pieces of correspondence asking what they could do. Philadelphia, the city of Philadelphia, carried a committing resolution to mirror ours. South Carolina was going through the process of one. Florida, at one point, they were talking about doing the same thing. And what ended up happening is because tens of thousands of Americans became aware of a situation, they engaged, they called the White House, they called the DOD, they called their congressmen, they called their senators. And the Army reversed their decision, and they allowed, this was his second appeal, and they allowed Sergeant First Class Martland to stay in the military. And again, there was a lot of work done on the congressional level by everyone from Congressman Dave Bratt to Congressman Duncan Hunter out of San Diego in California. But what I always tell people when I'm telling them about this is that what this really proved was that at the end of the day, when the American people are made aware of something that's going on with one of their soldiers, one of their Marines, one of their sailors, one of their airmen, that's how they see it. It's their military. And they spoke up, and government heard them as a result. And so I think it not only restores some faith in that process, but I think it told every serviceman and women serving overseas that the American people have their back.
Yep.
And
right.
that was really important.
Well, congratulations to both of you. And Senator, we know you're very active here in terms of veterans. You co-chair the military caucus with Delegate Rich Anderson.
Right.
Talk to us about some of the work that caucus engages in.
Well, that caucus is really, to me, it's really unique. It almost operates as a committee. It really does. We put a bill matrix together of every veteran or military bill that's in between the two chambers, and it works really in a bipartisan way. But we've done everything. In fact, I'm carrying a bill this year that once it finishes the House, I think it's on second reading in the House today, but it'll actually position Virginia to be the only state in the Union to complete the top 10 Department of Defense key issues this year. So I also serve on the Commission on Military Installations and Defense Activities, which is a state level response to BRAC, which is the Base Realignment Closure Act, which is coming in 2018. It's been an amazing journey to serve on that, and one of our philosophies is we want to grow under BRAC. We don't want to lose anything, and I think we've postured ourselves in that right positive posture to actually gain resources, troop strength. In fact, we actually grew by a brigade in our National Guard this year, and in our National Guard I couldn't be prouder of that we are starting the only stand-up cyber brigade, which will be housed at Fort Belvoir, and that's going to be the 29th Infantry will hold that. So there's some amazing things going on with regard to the military caucus and the bills that we participate in. Nick is part of that, of course, and there's a good group of legislators, and I think the best thing about it is there's no politics in that. It's all about taking care of those who, as Nick often says, wear the cloth of the country, that are wearing it now, and those who have worn it. And it's just been an amazing committee to be part of.
Nick, talk to us about our returning veterans and opportunities for them, especially in terms of the Triple V program that Virginia has. Virginia values veterans and the ability of those who have served, who have picked up a skill, for example, to go to a community college and not have to take a course because of the skills he or she has picked up.
Well, I think this is something that Virginia really has genuinely led the way on. And again, a lot of that has been Delegate Anderson in the House, Senator Reeves on that side, Delegate Stolley. A lot of the various veterans have recognized that guys are picking up, our servicemen and women are picking up incredibly valuable skill sets while they're in the military, not just from the educational or the training standpoint, but from the application. When you have someone that has been, for instance, not only gone through combat medic, but now has served multiple tours overseas as a combat medic, that's a skill set that simply just can't be replicated within a classroom. And one of the big hang-ups a lot of my friends coming back from overseas has faced is when they go into a university setting or when they go into a community college setting, they're not getting credits for those courses. And some of this, I think, stems from the fact that obviously, the university, they want you to take as many credits through their university as possible. But again, it's creating a barrier to entry. And our economy right now needs skilled labor. It needs educated labor, but it also needs people that are mission focused, that have a strong work ethic, all of those things that the military helps provide, teamwork, etc. And we're forcing these guys who have come out of the military to go through a full 3 or 4 years of college instead of when they really should only have to go through probably 2 in order to complete that degree and get into the workforce. So by making it easy for Virginia veterans or any veterans coming to Virginia to be able to get college credit for equivalent training that they received in the military, not just pushing it all into an elective, but actually within the career path that they're going to go, it significantly reduces the amount of time and money that they have to spend with respect to a 2-year degree or a 4-year university, and it allows them to get into the workplace all that much faster. And I think the other important thing to keep in mind with this is that we understand that someone coming right out of high school, okay, you might want them to have that full college experience where they got to live in the dorm and everything else. We're not necessarily debating that, but to tell a 26, 27, 28-year-old sergeant first, or staff sergeant first class who has a wife, a couple kids, and a mortgage, that you're not getting a degree from our university until you've taken the exact same classes that you got in the military through ours, that creates a horrendous burden on them. They want to get back. They want to be productive members of society. They want to be able to contribute to their country and the workforce. And the work that we've done on that, I think, has been great. There's more work to be done. And I do appreciate that we have had a lot of help from our community colleges in Virginia that really are stepping up to help us to meet that requirement for our veterans and make Virginia a veteran-friendly state.
What about veteran service centers? Senator, I know last year there was money in the budget to create 2 of them, one in the Hampton Roads area, one in Northern Virginia.
You mean the care centers?
The care centers, yeah. How's that going?
It's going phenomenally well. They've located where they're going to put those. The state stepped up their piece before the federal government. We did some haranguing there to make sure that we moved up, and that's clicking away as we speak, and designs are being drawn, and it's going great. I'll caveat on Nick's, you asked about the V3 program. I think there's almost like 276 companies now, and that's a unique program to Virginia. In fact, everywhere I go to speak, oftentimes people ask, hey, how did you guys set this up or that up? V3 is tremendous because it's training employers on the value of a veteran, where you can take a tank driver and he can probably drive any piece of equipment that's out in a yard that moves heavy construction, right? So, but what takes time for these companies is to understand that when that veteran comes, as Nick alluded to, they have experience. They have the knowledge, skills, and ability to do just about anything, any kind of condition you want to put them into. But a lot of companies don't look at that. They fill out that employee form, have you done this, this, and this, and then you don't qualify. So what we've had to do is reprogram employers. We have great programs, Troop to Trucks. If you have a commercial driver's license, or if you're a 5-ton driver in the Marine Corps, the Army, we're going to make sure that if you're going to get out in Virginia, we're going to try to get you a commercial driver's license and start those linkages happening right away. Nick mentioned the medic program. We just got our first Navy corpsman signed up into that program with Centera, and it's a direct link. He left active duty. Now he's going to work with Centera, so we're matching those veterans to actual JOBs right away with their skill set. We've done troops to energy, all these other things. And then the component that I think Nick is talking about is that educational component where your military occupation skill set is defined in the military, and we're getting universities to talk to the military, the education side of the military, and linking those. So we're not losing that. So some of these guys come out, and maybe they've worked in cyber before, can come out and go to Nova and get certified. 2 years, they're certified and have their Microsoft certifications, and they're working back to work. Possibly in the same billet that they just left on the active duty side with more credentials. And so for us, it's about creating those opportunities for our veterans who are highly skilled, highly motivated, ready to go to work day one with the employers. And so we focus on a lot of that down here. How do we take that burden of that regulatory burden of that process and try to streamline it and make those work, make those connections.
And I take it we're doing the same thing for those veterans returning or who are resident here already who want to become entrepreneurs.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, again, it all goes back to, as Senator Reeves was talking about the mindset. And one of the things I actually get to do when I'm outside the legislature is help place veterans into the corporate world and from an entrepreneurial perspective as well. So it really is about, again, reducing some of the regulatory barrier, because we've put a lot of things into code that, again, probably sounded good at the time, but at the end, create those barriers of entry into the marketplace. And I'll just reiterate what Bryce said again with respect to getting employers to look at veterans differently. We had this, I would say we went through this phase where there were a lot of people within the corporate world where they just wanted to hire a veteran. And they looked at it as, I'm doing my corporate responsibility, and everyone appreciates that and respects that, but we really wanted to make them understand what they were getting. And that this isn't just hiring someone for a feel-good billet in your company so you can say you hired a veteran. This is about creating an environment where you as a company are going to benefit because you have someone highly trained, dedicated, a team player, mission-focused. And again, getting them to understand that. And then again, setting up those additional programs where we also have veterans that they can move very quickly from the military, perhaps into a particular skill field, and then right into becoming an entrepreneur. Because obviously that's one of the things that, again, is the unique about the United States is the way we empower entrepreneurs to be able to go out there, create jobs, create new innovations. And again, we want people with that kind of mindset looking at Virginia as a great place to come live, raise a family, and start a business.
We have a program this year. The gentleman, the Secretary of Veterans Affairs and Defense, is just a phenomenal individual. He's a retired 4-star Admiral, John Harvey, who gets it. And this year we have a bill that will help specifically on entrepreneurship in our veterans community. The hard part was we're at a $1.26 billion shortfall. So we have budget language in the budget to allow us to continue the work to start developing that program. And that's oftentimes all we need to kind of go and find out if it's going to be a worthy endeavor. But I'm looking forward to that as well. I mean, we've had some challenges, but we've overcome those as well. And you had mentioned about the veteran services locations, not the care centers, but I just want to talk about our own Department of Veteran Services. They're amazing. The service centers we have, most veterans don't even realize that we have a state-level veteran services. And we have a single portal now where you can go in on the app, and if you're a veteran, you can see employment opportunities and V3 and all these things. So it's single source because everybody wants to help these guys and gals that have served. We know that, but oftentimes it's matching the resources to the needs and linking them through the process because it's not always easy. Plus, they also deal with appeals with regard to that process. So, Nick has been a great foxhole buddy. We're both Rangers, so we have that same mentality. And he's been a great teammate down here for us to carry these types of bills. And I think that synergy works. It's good for the district. We share the same districts, of course. I have a few more pieces that he doesn't, but I couldn't ask for a better partner down at the General Assembly than Nick Freitas.
Now, you just came from the Courts of Justice Committee meeting, I believe. Is there any discussion this year about what some localities have done in terms of creating a veterans court, those kinds of things?
So I carried the bill last year and the year before. There's a reluctance to actually use the term court. We first brought the bill forward, I think it was 2 years ago. I could be wrong. They kind of bleed into each other. But the challenge we have is this. We have a drug court system now that we know works. But I think in all their wisdom, the House was probably right in this one in saying we don't need to set up another court per se, but allow the discretion through the Supreme Court to delegate that down to their judges. So we're not monkeying around in the judicial system. We'll let them set them up. And I'll give you an example. Rick Regal, who's a judge up in Spotsylvania Circuit Court, is a former Marine. He just made it to Circuit Court. He was a General District Court. He has set up a veterans docket to help handle that. And it's an amazing process because, look, we're not trying to say go easy on veterans when they screw up, but what we are trying to do is say, hey, look, if the guy is in a, hypothetically, been drinking, got in a domestic assault situation, and he's in court now standing before a judge, there's some underlying issues there that maybe he just got back from 2 tours in Afghanistan that haven't been addressed. So while he does what he's supposed to do according to the law and what they have there, that judge also can have those resources there to link that veteran up right away. So if they do need that counseling for substance abuse or marriage counseling, those sort of things that typically you wouldn't just get in a normal courtroom with a simple domestic assault. And so, you know, because at some point that veteran was a squared away trooper, right? And we know that, but they probably have engaged in some things that have kind of rewired their brain and caused them to go off path. And so I think it's a phenomenal opportunity for us to move forward.
And if I could just provide another example of that, I just got a call last night from a good friend of mine, not in Virginia, in a different state, but served in the military, served in the intelligence community, did defense contracting. Well, not long ago, him and 2 other Americans were captured by a Saudi militia, held and tortured for multiple months until they were finally rescued. This is less than a year ago. He's been dealing with health issues as a result. Obviously, there's psychological issues that go along with that. And then had to go into the hospital. He was given heavy amounts of medication to deal with some of the health issues he was dealing with. He wakes up in the middle of the night, his IV had come out, and all he sees is his arm bleeding. And he is right back in Iraq. And now he's facing 2 felony assault charges. He doesn't even remember the incident. And so these are the sort of things where we need to be able to come. Now, again, I'm very hopeful that the DA in that area is going to look at that within the proper context. And Bryce is right. This isn't about giving a special consideration to veterans when they have done something wrong. This is about identifying that there are certain psychological issues that can take place under the stress of combat that can have an effect. And a lot of our guys are returning and they're not getting the assistance they need. And one of the things I've been really appreciative with the way that we have handled this issue in Virginia is we don't treat our veterans like they're victims.
That's right.
We treat our veterans like the warriors that they are. But like anybody else, when you go through stressful situations, it has a way of changing things. It has emotional and psychological components. And we need to be able to deal with those effectively rather than taking somebody that, again, had a bad moment like my friend and all of a sudden strapping them with a criminal record for the rest of their lives.
What about homelessness for veterans? How's the Commonwealth doing in that regard?
Well, you know, there's a lot of things I disagree with the governor on, but this is one that I think the governor got it right. And the team got it right, and we have theoretically ended veterans' homelessness. We've set up the systems in place that within about 24 hours of identifying a veteran that's homeless, we've had them in that process and get them in a home. And it's just an incredible, there's a lot of moving parts, there's a lot of coordination that goes with that, but it's a very effective program. Myself, Nick's done it, Delegate Anderson, you make that call and you find that veteran that's on the side of the road holding the sign. If they want that help, we can make that happen. And so, you know, that's going to be a consistent rolling number. You're going to have people that become homeless, but it's been an amazing process, and I think there's a lot of states that are trying to replicate what we've done.
Industrial hemp. I think you have some legislation dealing with that. Talk to us about that.
I did. Unfortunately, there's still some alive in the Senate. Unfortunately, my bill died in appropriations. And I I'm a little bit frustrated with the administration on this one. We keep trying to come up with ways that we're going to revitalize rural and Southwest Virginia, and they always seem to include, this administration always seems to want to include some sort of redistributive policy or some sort of government mandated investment program. And here we have the ability with a product like industrial hemp, which we always tell people it's rope, not dope. Right. If you smoke industrial hemp, you're going to be upset, right? But it's an incredibly diverse fiber. It has a multitude of uses, and it's very environmentally friendly. And so we have an opportunity to again help some of our rural areas that have been agriculture for centuries now, instead of trying to revitalize these areas with some sort of government-infused program. We have the ability to just open up, deregulate, and allow those farmers to be able to take advantage of this product, not to mention the fact that we would be giving our farmers a huge advantage over the rest of the country at this point. But unfortunately, there was a $2.8 million price tag that was attached to it.
That's a lot of seeds.
Yeah, and the argument, and again, I have to laugh at that, because all we were doing was saying, you're free to grow industrial hemp. And again, the administration came by and said, well, it's going to cost $2.8 million because we need to hire 22 more analysts for Department of Forensic Science. And so it's problematic, but again, we're going in that direction. It just makes sense to do it. The bottom line is that there is a stigma attached to industrial hemp that doesn't belong there. And I think part of that was placed because certain industries were trying to protect their market share. And it's time to open up this competition. It's time to empower Virginia farmers to be able to do this and, again, revitalize their own communities.
Great. Well, we appreciate you being here. Keep up the good work. Senator Bryce Reeves, Delegate Nick Freitas.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans. Mm-hmm.